All right, guys, welcome back. We are still on the conversation about how to close deals. And if you are just listening for the first time, some of the ideas that we have run through are to look at simple or complex sales situations because that is the real key determinant whether closing the deal in one industry is different from closing the deal in any other. So you shouldn't just assume that closing the deal is the same in every single scenario. And so, because I used to sell maybe eyeglasses in the past, I had a shop that sold eyeglasses. So, because of that, I just assumed that I'm going to be able to sell really well in real estate, or if I'm going to sell myself as a wedding planner. And so the major difference is not because you need different closing techniques per se. It's just that depending on which scenario you're involved in, you have to work the principles or apply the principles in a different order. So the first step is to figure out, am I in a simple sales scenario or a complex sales context? So that's the first question. Then we looked at different ideas around closing and pretty much just looking into this whole idea of whether you can just come in at the first meeting and then close the deal and get hundreds of thousands of naira and just that whole showboating superstar salesman or saleswoman image that is out there. And then another question that we looked at was how to determine if you have a deal in the first place. And in two episodes, we have looked at what qualification is all about. And I think it was the last recording where we went over the kinds of questions that you're supposed to ask, or rather, the kind of information that you should be looking for when you're trying to run qualification with your prospective clients, because you have to find out there's a need, whether there's a need or a want. Let's see what else. If you have matching inventory, I mean, basically, that's if you can fulfill the order. So for photographers, wedding photographers like us, for instance, that's where we worry about whether it's the style or the sense of aesthetics are something that we can fulfill. We also want to be sure that we are in sync when it comes to money issues and that we understand the decision-making structure, because we want to make sure that we're involving everybody that should be involved in the conversation. And then, of course, we're also trying to find out if they have any sense of urgency around them, because like I've pointed out time and time again, it it's not to your benefit if you're speaking to people who have all the money in the world. Let's say Buhari's daughter just got recently engaged, and so you're excited that you're talking to Buhari's daughter. I mean, let's assume he has another daughter apart from the one who got married last year. So it's not going to do you any good if you're speaking to her. Her father is the president. They have all the money. But the thing is, she just got recently engaged. The families haven't met. They haven't had a meeting. They haven't booked a hall. Let's see what else. The traditional discussions have not started. You can't really say that you have a deal in that regard, and so you're just happy and chomping at the bits because you think you're going to get millions of naira if you close the deal, planning the wedding. The best case scenario is, you probably have someone that you ought to follow up with again as things get more serious, but you can't really say, given all the circumstances that I have listed out right now, that you have a deal. So, we're still going to be on the qualification trail because there's one thing that I forgot to do when we had the last recording, and that was I forgot to go over qualification frameworks that you can use, because it's all fine and dandy to say that this is the kind of information that we're looking for. Is there a need? Is there a want? Are they actually interested? What kind of money expectations are we looking at? Have they fixed the date? Is there any sense of urgency here? So it's all well and good to be able to say that. But for those of you who are newbies and haven't been involved in any kind of business, sales, negotiations, marketing before, it might be overwhelming because you don't have any practical sense about how to go about it. Now, if this is your first time of listening to the podcast, when you're done with this recording, you can pause, or rather stop, and then you head back to the menu and you scroll down a couple of episodes. Unfortunately, I didn't number the episodes when I started this podcast recording, and we have over 250 episodes over here on the podcast so far. So just look for anything that has qualification in the title, and I'm sure it would expose you to a couple of qualification frameworks that we have discussed in the past. But right now, what I'm going to do is to share just two of the qualification frameworks that I shared with the folks at Kairos Real Estate. And it was at the sales training session that we had with Kairos Real Estate that we got this where I developed this material. I developed this material for the sales team basically, and I'm sharing it here on the podcast because I firmly believe that the principles of sales, selling, persuasion, marketing, whatever it is you want to call it, are universal and they apply across all industries in time and space. The only thing that we have to do is just to use some creativity to see how it applies in this particular context. So, two of the qualifications frameworks that I shared with them are one called BANT, that is BANT, and that's an acronym for budget, authority, need, and timelines. So for those of you who are trying to write, I'll repeat that again. BANT is an acronym for budget, authority, need, and timelines, and then 5 whys. So let me start off with the 5 whys because this one is much more popular, and I'm sure that some of you may have heard of it already, especially if you've been hanging around motivational speakers. So this is something that also comes in handy. Sorry, not 5 whys, the 5 W's. Yes, the 5 W framework. Now, the 5 W's just refers to, the W's that we already know and that we were taught in back in primary school, for those of us who are Nigerian. And that is why, who, what, where, when, and then some people throw in how, even though that's not a W per se, but you can see how it fits. So if I remember correctly, that is what, why, when, who, and how. So you're going to be asking open-ended questions that basically start with any of these words. So congratulations, thanks for coming by the stand. Who is the bride? You see, that's a who question. Doesn't mean that you have 5 people who have approached your booth if you had a wedding fair. So who, when did you guys get engaged? Have you guys selected a hall? Which hall is it? When are the days that you have planned? So you can see how all these how you can start asking open-ended questions based on this framework of these open-ended who, why, what, where, when, and how. Now, this is the whole idea. You don't necessarily have to start off the questions using words in this framework. But the principle behind it is that you should ask open-ended questions. Because if you ask questions that can be answered by yes or no, or by the nod of a head, or by the shake of a head, then you don't have enough information to take the relationship forward or to take the sales process forward. So you should be asking open-ended questions so that the prospective clients are forced to talk. And the more that they talk about themselves and their situation and their vision and their dreams and their plans or their difficulties, it is then that you'll be able to tease out how it is that you're going to be able to help as their wedding photographer, their videographer, or as the wedding planner, who is the ultimate problem solver and the ultimate superhero when it comes to weddings. I know some of you might not agree with that characterization that I have of wedding planners, but that's just my own opinion. Not that they pay me any money to keep hyping them up like that. Let's just face it, they are the Jerry Maguire of our situations. So, oh no, not Jerry Maguire. What's that guy's name? I can't remember his name. The fellow who is very good at multitasking, the almost superhero guy, almost like Batman. Gosh, I can't remember his name. And hopefully I remember it before the recording is over. So yes, so that's the principle behind it. It's open-ended questions, even if you don't start off the conversation by saying who, what, when, why, how, which, whatever W that you can come up with. And so the next qualification framework is the BANT, which is the budget, authority, need, and timeline. And the individual words in the acronym just shows how the kinds of questions that you should be asking. So budget questions, that means you need to be having these money questions up front. So you don't necessarily have to come out and ask Buhari's daughter, how much have you guys budgeted for this wedding? That's a question that I ask sometimes anyway, these things all depend upon your style, your personality, what else? Because some people can ask that kind of question: how much have you allocated? How much have you budgeted? And it might come across as too forceful. But for me, it's something that I use time and time again, and I think it works perfectly fine. So, given your relationship to Buhari's daughter or whoever it is that you're talking to, how much have you budgeted? How much have you allocated? Might seem too big, or no, not too big, too forceful, or maybe too aggressive. So some people get around that by asking other kinds of questions, like a simple, so what have you got planned, or what does your ideal vision of a beautiful wedding day look like? So when you put it that way, they can feel free to talk, because they won't get the sense that you're trying to size them up to see, is this person a Pepper Aristotle? Do they have a lot of money? How much can I squeeze out from them? Those sorts of things that the average Nigerian is afraid of. And that's one reason why I think a lot of Nigerians don't disclose too much when it comes to the budget thing, because they're probably thinking, yes, I have budgeted 500,000 naira, but there's no point in me telling this dude that I budgeted 500,000, because if I tell him I've budgeted 500,000, he's going to try and squeeze me for 800k. So let me just keep quiet about the budget. So these are the kinds of questions that you can ask to get a sense of the budget. What's your idea of the perfect day? So what is it that you have planned? Assuming money was not an object, what is it that you would like to do? Stuff like that. So basically ask questions about the budget. Then the authority is around this whole decision-making structure that I have been talking about in previous podcasts. So I already gave the story about my experience of dealing with a northern couple, where in their own part of the world, it's the groom's family who handles photography and video and stuff like that. But my video guy Sheko and I failed to ask the questions from the beginning, and so we kept on speaking with the bride, because we assumed that with the dozens of brides that we've worked with in the past, that it was going to be the same. Like, it would have all the negotiations with the bride, and the money would probably come from the bride or from the bride's family. But it just so happens that in their part of the country, it's the groom's family who handles those sorts of things. And unfortunately, we didn't get him involved early on in the process. And I think that's one of the factors that ended up in us losing out on the deal, because while we were talking with the bride, he was also running parallel negotiations with other photographers and videographers, of course, which kinds of makes sense. So we're in this situation where we were the bride and we're kind of talking across purposes. So if we had asked the questions right from the beginning, we would have been able to find out that things work differently with them, would have involved the groom, and our chances of closing the deal might have gone up. It's no guarantee, and when it comes to sales, there's no guarantee. You just keep doing things that increasingly put the odds in your favor. So so you try and ask questions around authority. Then questions around the need as well. We've already spoken about that extensively over the past 2 episodes. If this is your first time listening in on the podcasts, when you're done with this, just skip back 2 episodes and listen, and I think you'll get enough on the need there. And of course, I think we've already gone on about why timelines are important. The whole thing about timelines is that gives you a sense of whether there's any sense of urgency. So, like in the example that I spoke about, you're speaking to Buhari's daughter, you need to ask, yeah, so congratulations, you just got recently engaged. So, when's the wedding date? That's a timeline question. That will give you a sense of whether there's any urgency here or not. Because if you say, when's the wedding, and you're talking to her in 2021, and they say, oh, we're looking at early in 2019, sorry, no, 2021, okay, and they say, okay, we're looking at 2025. So that's what's that? Is that a 4-year period? A 3-year or a 4-year period? There's no sense of urgency there per se. So you know that you can take your time and stretch out the follow-up process, because you don't have to follow up like a maniac. But then on the other hand, if you're speaking to her of December of 2021, and she says, oh, the wedding is going to be in February 2022, then you know that there's some urgency here. They're going to want to make progress really quickly with selecting vendors and what else? selecting vendors, selecting venues, making all the preparations. And so because of that, there's some urgency here, and now you know that a you need to speed up your sales cadences. So if you're speaking in December, the wedding is in February. This is not one of those things where you speak to the bride today and then you schedule your follow-up for 2 weeks. You probably have to, move things along quickly. Maybe following up every week, because ideally, in my own opinion, it would be nice to secure the deposit in January if the wedding is going to be in February. So, so those are ways that you gauge urgency by asking timeline questions. So when is the wedding date? Have you selected the hall? When are you ready to start? When are you ready to start committing to vendors? Those sorts of questions, they give you a good sense of what the timelines are. So I will wrap it up right here, and I think with this we should be able to bring this whole qualification part of the discussion to a close. Remember, if this is your first time listening, skip back 2 episodes. You hear a lot more about need and timeline, and when you're done with that, head back out to the main menu, check down the over 250 episodes that we have over here on the podcast, and you're going to see some more about qualification frameworks, as well as lots of other good stuff about the discipline of personal selling and how to handle one-on-one conversations with your clients. Now, if this is your first time listening to the podcast and you don't happen to be a wedding vendor, you're not in the event industry, do not despair. The principles of sales and selling and marketing and persuasion and negotiating and all that good stuff are universal. Whatever it is that you find here, you'll be able to relate it to your own industry as well. So you just keep listening, keep learning, and asking yourself, how can I apply this to my own industry? Because one of the podcasts that I listen to that I like is actually a sales podcast, but it's about the plumbing industry. And the fellow is trying to elevate the game of plumbers, not Nigerian anyway, American plumbers. Well, he's more of like a rough Jersey fellow, so I like his attitude. But he's trying to elevate the level of the game, and his mantra is service over sales. And that is something that we can learn in this part of the world, particularly wedding photographers, because we're all artsy and we think it's all about us. So this whole idea of service over sales, let's be professional, let's be on point, let's look the part, let's sound the part, let's execute the part. All that is really important. Anyhow, I've just been droning on and on, but bottom line, I'm just trying to say that if it's a marketing podcast or a sales podcast, but it's targeted towards carpenters or plumbers, you're still going to be able to find some useful tidbits, even though you're a wedding planner, or even if you are electrician or swimming pool technician or swimming pool cleaner or whatever. You'll be able to learn lots of useful stuff. So thank you very much for your time and attention. I have gone well beyond the 15-minute mark. In fact, right now I've made so many promises, I'm not sure what I promised you guys the last time, whether I promised that I would keep it to 15 minutes or keep it to 5. But either way, we've gone well above that. So thank you very much for listening to the Sales for the Nigerian Wedding Industry podcast. I'm your host, Abuja-based sales consultant and event media professional, Tavishima Ayede. Thanks for your time and attention. I'll catch you guys at the next recording.